listening to the Chapter a Day Bible Study. I'm John Stange, and today we're in Joshua 15, the inheritance of Judah. Joshua 15 is one of those chapters that many people attempt to read quickly or just skim the contents. It's a chapter that includes a long list of borders, cities, and territorial descriptions. But this chapter also reveals the faithfulness of God in remarkable ways. Every boundary line and every city name represented a fulfilled promise. God had brought his people into the land he swore to give them generations earlier. This chapter focuses primarily on the inheritance given to the tribe of Judah. The land is carefully described from the southern border to the western coastline and from the wilderness regions to the hill country. God was being specific with his promises. Israel could physically see the evidence that the Lord keeps his word. One of the key verses in this chapter says this. In verse 10 we read, "And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, just as he said, these 45 years since the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses." Even though this statement technically comes from the previous chapter, it directly connects to what unfolds in Joshua 15. Caleb and the tribe of Judah were witnessing the fulfillment of God's promises in real time. So this chapter begins with the description of Judah's territory. In verse 1 we read, "The allotment for the tribe of the people of Judah according to their clans reached southward to the boundary of Edom, to the wilderness of Zin at the farthest south." This wasn't random geography. This was covenant fulfillment. Centuries earlier, God promised Abraham that his descendants would inherit the land. We see this back in Genesis 12. Abraham never saw the full realization of that promise during his earthly life, but God's timing never fails. What he promises, he accomplishes. That truth still encourages us today. There are moments when we wonder if the Lord sees us, remembers us, or intends to fulfill what he's spoken to us in his word. And then Joshua 15 reminds us that God doesn't forget his promises. His plans unfold according to his perfect wisdom and perfect timing. This chapter also highlights Caleb again, one of the most inspiring figures in the Old Testament. Caleb requested the hill country where the giants still lived because he trusted the Lord to give him victory. Joshua 15 records the outcome. In verse 14, it says this, "And Caleb drove out from there the three sons of Anak, Sheshai and Ahiman and Talmai, the descendants of Anak." Caleb didn't settle for comfort. Even in his old age, he walked by faith. He trusted God more than he feared opposition. There's something powerfully instructive about that, and personally speaking, I take great inspiration from Caleb's example. Many people begin their walk with the Lord passionately, but then gradually drift towards spiritual passivity. But Caleb shows us what enduring faith looks like. He remained confident in God's strength decades after first entering the promised land as a spy. The confidence Caleb demonstrated points us toward Jesus. Caleb was courageous and faithful, but Jesus is perfectly faithful. Caleb fought giants in Canaan, but Jesus defeated far greater enemies, including sin, death, and Satan himself. When Jesus went to the cross, he confronted the giants we could never overcome on our own. Through his resurrection, he secured an eternal inheritance for all who trust in him. The land allotments referenced here in the book of Joshua were temporary and earthly. Israel would later lose possession of much of the land because of disobedience and exile. But the inheritance Jesus gives his people can never be taken away. Joshua 15 also includes the account of Caleb's daughter, Achsah. After her marriage to Othniel, she boldly asked her father for springs of water in addition to the land she had received. Verse 19 says, "She said to him, 'Give me a blessing. Since you have given me the land of the Negeb, give me also springs of water.' And he gave her the upper springs and the lower springs." That's a beautiful picture of the generosity of God. Achsah asked, and Caleb responded graciously. In a far greater way, believers can confidently approach the Lord, knowing that he delights to provide what we truly need. Jesus reminded us of this truth when he said this in John chapter 7, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink." The springs Oxa received sustained physical life in a dry land. Jesus provides living water that sustains eternal life. He refreshes weary souls, he strengthens discouraged hearts, and he satisfies spiritual thirst forever. Toward the end of the chapter, we come across a statement that should concern us when we consider its implications. Verse 63 says this, "But the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the people of Judah could not drive out." Even in the midst of victory, incomplete obedience remained a problem. Israel possessed much of the land, but pockets of resistance continued to exist. That verse reminds us that God's people still struggle with sin, and they still struggle with spiritual compromise in this present life. Even as redeemed people, we often tolerate attitudes and habits and fears that the Lord calls us to surrender to Him completely. But this also points us toward the greater victory of Jesus. What Israel could not fully accomplish, Christ ultimately will. One day, Jesus will establish His kingdom completely and permanently. Every enemy will be defeated. Every effect of sin will be removed. Every promise of God will reach its perfect fulfillment. Joshua 15 may seem like a chapter about ancient borders and forgotten cities, but it's actually a testimony to the faithfulness of God. It reminds us that the Lord keeps His promises, that the Lord strengthens His people, that He provides for their needs, and that He secures an eternal inheritance through Jesus Christ. So, as you reflect on this chapter today, remember this simple but powerful truth. The God who fulfilled His promises to Judah is the same God who remains faithful to you today. He hasn't forgotten you. He hasn't abandoned His plans for your life. And through Jesus, He has already secured an inheritance far greater than any earthly land could ever provide. Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Chapter a Day Bible Study. For more resources to help you in your walk with Christ and your understanding of the Bible, please visit my website at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. And if you'd like to partner with me by becoming a supporter of this ministry, you'll see a few options to do so, again, at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com or in the description of this episode. As always, thank you for your prayers, thank you for your support, and thank you for your willingness to share this content with others. Have a great day, and I'll see you again right here tomorrow.